Picture this, 44 years of marriage, and at 68, I filed for divorce. Everyone said I'd lost my mind. Where would I go at my age? Who would want an old woman like me? How could I possibly survive alone? Well, 3 years have passed since that decision changed everything. And you know what? These have been the most incredible 3 years of my entire existence. Friends, write in the comments where you're watching us from. And hit that like button if you want to discover what's most surprising and unexpected. Let me take you back to the beginning of this story that nobody saw coming. We weren't high school sweethearts or anything romantic like that. We met through mutual friends at 24. He seemed stable, reliable, the kind of man your parents approve of instantly. Back then, that felt like winning the lottery. Security meant everything to our generation. The first decade was actually beautiful. We built something together, created a home from nothing. 2 children arrived, and suddenly we had this shared mission that consumed every waking moment. But here's what nobody tells you about long marriages. People don't just change, they become completely different humans. The man I married loved adventures, weekend trips to nowhere, spontaneous decisions. I evolved too, but in the opposite direction. Motherhood had caged my spirit for years. When the kids became teenagers, this wild hunger for life awakened inside me. I wanted to explore museums, take cooking classes, maybe learn another language. We started living like strangers who happened to share the same address and bank account. Mornings meant discussing utility bills and whose turn it was to take out garbage. Evenings meant sitting in the same room while existing in completely different universes. We hadn't had a real conversation about dreams, fears, or hopes in probably 15 years. The worst part wasn't anger or resentment. Those emotions require some level of caring. What we had was something far more devastating. Complete and total indifference. I'd watch him reading the same newspaper sections in identical order every single morning. He'd glance at me like I was furniture that occasionally moved and required acknowledgement. The children were our only remaining connection, and even that felt forced and artificial. I looked at him across that auditorium and thought, is this really how I want to spend whatever time I have left? The statistics hit me like a sledgehammer. Women my age might live another 25 years. 25 years of tiptoeing around someone who found my very existence mildly irritating. That night I did something I hadn't done in decades. I really looked at myself in the mirror. Not checking my appearance or fixing my hair, but actually seeing the person staring back. I asked her out loud, what do you actually want from the rest of your life? The answer came immediately, like it had been waiting decades for someone to finally ask. I wanted to wake up excited about the day ahead instead of dreading 12 more hours of nothingness. I wanted to travel somewhere, anywhere, without spending 6 months negotiating every tiny detail. Most of all, I wanted to stop feeling guilty for wanting these perfectly reasonable things. His response was exactly what I expected. We didn't need strangers interfering in our private business. When I mentioned taking a pottery class at the community center, he asked who would cook dinner. He wasn't intentionally cruel or controlling. In some ways, that might have been easier to address. He was simply a person who had decided that life was about maintaining comfort and avoiding disruption. Meanwhile, I was becoming someone who felt suffocated by that exact same comfort and routine. He ordered his usual meal without looking at the menu, made the same joke to the waitress, complained about the same things. I sat there watching this performance of a marriage and realized I couldn't participate anymore. That night, I told him I wanted a divorce. Friends kept calling with their wise advice. You've invested so much time, don't throw it all away now. But here's what nobody tells you. Sunk cost fallacy isn't just for business. It destroys lives, too. I listened to everyone's opinions for months, nodding politely while my soul was screaming for freedom. Then one Tuesday morning, I looked in the mirror and said out loud, they don't live my life. I do. That was my turning point. The moment I stopped asking permission to be happy. Friends, write in the comments where you're watching us from and hit like if you want to know what's most surprising and unexpected. The divorce papers felt heavier than I expected. Not because I was sad, but because they represented rebirth. My lawyer, a kind woman in her 50s, looked at me and said, You're braver than most people half your age. That first night alone in 44 years, the silence was deafening. I won't lie to you about that. I made myself tea at midnight because I could. Nobody there to complain about the kitchen noise. I called my sister crying, asking if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. She said something that changed everything. Honey, the only mistake would be going back to dying slowly. Month 3 brought the first real joy. I could eat ice cream for breakfast without judgment. Sounds silly? Maybe. But it symbolized something profound. Autonomy over my own existence. Turquoise became my new favorite color. Vibrant, alive, everything my marriage hadn't been. 6 months in, I did something crazy. Booked a solo trip to Italy, something I'd dreamed of for decades. He used to say international travel was wasteful, too complicated, too risky for people our age. A young backpacker asked if I was okay. I told him I was perfect for the first time in years. That trip taught me something crucial. I wasn't too old for new experiences. I was finally old enough to appreciate them. Back home, people noticed the change immediately. They said I looked 10 years younger. My daughter admitted later that she'd forgotten what my real laugh sounded like until then. Year 2 brought unexpected friendships. Turns out lots of women my age were questioning their own situations. We formed what we jokingly called the Late Bloomer Society. Women rediscovering themselves after decades. Margaret left her husband at 72. Susan started painting at 68. Joan learned to drive at 75. We realized we'd all been living according to other people's expectations instead of our own desires. The loneliness that everyone warned me about, it never came. Because I finally had the most important relationship with myself. But difficult isn't the same as wrong, and discomfort isn't the same as mistake. Year 3 brought the biggest surprise of all. I met someone, but this time I knew who I was first. Not a rescuer or a replacement, but a companion who enhanced my already fulfilling life. The difference was staggering. I chose him from strength, not desperation or societal pressure. We're not rushing into anything. We're too old for games and too wise for settling. My ex-husband? He's doing fine. He found someone who wants the quiet life he preferred. Turns out we weren't bad people, we were just wrong for each other, and that's perfectly okay. People still ask if I regret the lost years. But nothing's lost if it taught you something valuable. Those 44 years gave me my children, taught me resilience, showed me what I didn't want. Without that experience, I wouldn't have the clarity to appreciate what I have now. At 71, I dance twice a week, volunteer at the animal shelter, and take art classes. I travel somewhere new every few months, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends, always with joy. Last month, I went skydiving for my birthday. Yes, you heard that right. Skydiving at 71. The instructor was more nervous than I was, but I'd already taken the biggest leap of my life 3 years ago. My grandchildren think I'm the coolest grandmother ever. They love hearing about my adventures. I'm showing them that life doesn't end at retirement. It can actually begin there if you're brave enough. The message I want to leave you with isn't get divorced. That's not what this is about. It's about refusing to accept unhappiness as inevitable just because you've accepted it for a long time. I sleep peacefully now because I'm finally living authentically. And authenticity is the ultimate comfort. Tomorrow I'm starting Spanish lessons because I want to see South America next year. Why not? People ask what's next in my new life, and you know what I tell them? Everything. Absolutely everything.